Before we start, I would like to make a short apology for the lack of videos. My only excuse is college, and unfortunately it's not over yet. I would also like to thank you all for still watching and commenting on my content. It does mean a lot to me, and I will always take the time to reply to you all. This video will contain a collection of glitches, speedrunning strategies and other fun things from my favourite game of all time. It's taken me a few days to make this because I had to play the game a couple of times on different machines to get a contrast. For future reference, most of the footage you'll see here is from the HD Steam release of the game because it looks a lot nicer and loads much faster. Oh, and ignore the 60 FPS counter on the bottom right, the video is actually in 30. Don't ask. Note that unless I state otherwise, everything you see occurs on both the Steam and the PAL PS2 version. I do not own any other console that runs the game like Xbox or GameCube, so my comparative options are limited. Also, you should go and watch Space Chicken afterwards, as he was my inspiration to do this. I'll put a link in the description. So thanks for clicking, and I hope you enjoy it. Starting off in Rainbow Cliffs, one of the first stupid bugs on the Steam version only is the camera correction when jumping to a higher platform. Even trying to get back up to Bly Bly Station from Julius's lab results in a futile effort to constantly recorrect the camera every time you jump on something, causing Ty to run in arbitrary directions. In the first stage, 2 Up, we encounter our first speedrunning trick. The game expects you to use these smaller rocks to get higher, but you can easily jump straight up to the Thunder Egg. Later on in the level, we see Julius again to get told about his latest invention, but you can jump on the dunny as it spawns in to avoid the cutscene trigger. It is also useful for speedrunners, as you kinda need that cog made of soft, valuable metal to make better rangs. Should you miss the jump, you would need to run back to a previous dunny to despawn this one. But if you have time to do that, then you should have time to talk to Julius and skip the dialogue. This next trick is also primarily used by speedrunners and involves jumping over this fence just before the gatepost, using the height boost from activating gliding. It can also be done on the other side too, but why you would is beyond me. Save the frames. This glitch only occurs when Ty is performing one of his standing animations, so we have to wait a bit before we can actually see it. As soon as he bites the mosquitoes flying around his head, throw a rang and his model seems to update with the last known structure of his jaw, giving this weird effect. Moving in any way apart from throwing another rang resets his model back to the default. Moving on to Walk in the Park, we have a small optimization here at the beginning where you can jump over these boulders after talking to Maury. A little afterwards we have the second largest skip in the game. When walking up the fallen trees, you can jump on the right hand side of this tree, over the invisible wall and onto a little platform. Jumping again over to the right might grant you enough momentum and distance to clear the slippery floor and make it over the cliff edge. Also useful for speedrunners as it clears the first half of the water slide. I know I said I wouldn't mention things that were available for PlayStation 2 as well, but I wanted to point out that you needed to aim more to the right when jumping over the second invisible wall. It's a neat trick, but it may take you a few attempts. Over in Shipwrecks, we have a rather fun element that Chrome Studios overlooked. This is Rex. His wife has gone to Danger Spike for some alone time, and he's worried that she's been away for too long. He would go himself, but he has lifeguard duty, despite the fact that there is no one at the beach. Not only that, but there are children's seahorses currently being held captive in different locations, but they're beyond the shark gate, so he doesn't worry himself about them. Anyway, after completing any level, you unlock the time trial. And since the finish line for Shipwrecks is at the top of Danger Spike, it begs one to wonder A, why Rex can leave his post for a race and not go looking for his missing wife, and B, why is it when we get to the top of Danger Spike where L is, it does not finish that mission as well. Also, since I've already done the race, I get a giant pie as a reward, which he just happened to have on him. So now speaking to Rex again, you'll see he has forgotten the past 2 or so minutes of his life and still wants to find L. There are two sections of the level that can only be accessed through underwater tunnels. At the far left corner of the first, swimming close to the left wall, you can find a few pixels to stand on, allowing you to jump higher over the slippery perimeter. In the second tunnel access section, there is a wrecked boat which has inside, by the front door, a button to allow entry. Usually one would need to swim to the other side and throw the aquarang through a hole, but since a thrown rang has collision up until it is back in Ty's hand, you can hit the button through the wall as it is returning to you. Just behind the boat there is a rather obvious texture placement with an interesting property. Swim over to the right hand seam and jump through, instantly landing you out of bounds. From here you can pretty much swim anywhere in the level as long as it is under above sea level land, if that makes sense. You can't swim where water is in the level as it has a boundary, and you can't swim under land that is too low as it still has collision. Here we can see a few things. First of all, some textures and sound effects are missing, and the ability to dive is no longer available, so you're stuck swimming on the surface. You can see here the tunnel connecting the two sections I mentioned earlier, and those stumps right there are trees. Going back inbounds is as easy as swimming back to the same texture and jumping back through the seam. You may also notice some wonderful islands in the background, some of which you cannot swim to, and you'll see why in a minute, but this one you can. After several millennia, you'll start swimming through the beach and under the island itself, only to find it is as hollow as your sense of accomplishment. Swimming beyond the island will eventually get you to the end of the conceivable map and immediately start plummeting you down into an endless void, where there is nothing to do but fall and creep ever closer to extinction. When you've had enough fun in the dark abyss, you can always exit the level through the menu. Over to where the sharks are, we have a rather tricky glitch. These sharks are programmed to never leave their individually designated areas unless they are pursuing Ty. However, should you interrupt their chase animation with their stunned animation, they will immediately start coming after Ty again from a new position. In order to get this shark through the gate leading to Danger Spike, you need to attract its attention and hit it with the explosion from a mine. This should give it enough reach to escape and hopefully get stuck where it shouldn't belong. Since it doesn't like being where it is, it will endlessly try to return home. It may take a few attempts like it did for me, but when you get it to work, the end result is worth it. Just don't let anyone from PETA or the RSPCA find out. As you can see, it will keep trying and trying to flee from your prison, but to no avail. Even flying doesn't save it. At Danger Spike, you can run over to the left-hand side of the mountain and find a bilby. Mine is replaced by a piece of pie as I've already collected him. Sorry about that. But right behind where he should be, you can run right up the cliff as it was never given a slippery attribute. Unfortunately, due to a silly mechanic added in the HD remake, which I will mention momentarily, this can be a bit more tricky than it should be. The mechanic in question is the fact that the manual camera control for this path all the way up to the top was removed. This forced automatic repositioning can cause a great deal of frustration when scaling the cliff, as you have to keep zigzagging to avoid bumping into things and falling down the pits. If you ever need to turn around, you have to move far enough for the game to realign the camera to a position that is helpful, but you can manually shift it by entering and exiting Ty's view. Please fix this, Chrome Studios, it sucks. Also, in case you didn't know, there is a hidden life at the top of Danger Spike on these outstanding platforms. Just behind the spire where L is, there is a peculiar audio bug where the sound of seagulls will only play when looking in a certain direction. Moving over to Bridge on the River Ty, we have our second out of bounds clip, but this one is actually useful for speedrunners. At the very start of the level, you can jump on the box and over the wall to the left. When done incorrectly, you will fall through one of the many gaps and land in the water outside of the level, from which there is no return. However, just like Shipwrecks, you can explore a lot of the map itself, so long as you are within the confinements of the map itself. But be careful, as there are some areas that can send you into the deathless void, and just like before, you must exit the level to escape. When done correctly, however, it will allow you to jump over the wall, getting you closer to the bilby. This really only saves a few seconds, but it's fun to try anyway. Just don't forget about that box when doing it casually like I did. It can also be done from the starting platform, but the angle can be a bit awkward. But doing it this way saves even more time, as you don't have to run backwards to the box. What remains of this level are just a few simple optimizations. For example, this cog can be acquired from the ground using the height boost from the double jump. When doing the missions for Dennis to fire up the pilot lights, all of the raised ones can be hit from the ground. Just aim for the pipe. I'm sure many people have nightmares about trying to catch these two turkeys within the time constraint, but if you can get them next to each other, walk just close enough so they don't run away and use a megabyte. This will hit both of them simultaneously, giving you the thunder egg. Speaking of, the megabyte can also be used to attract opals like the magnet pickup, and if you can cancel the animation before it finishes, the megabyte won't be consumed. Thank you Adam Stenterford for telling me about that one. And finally, with our good friend Neddy, all you really need to do is lure him into charging, even for a moment, and then jump behind him so you can hit him while he's recovering. I always thought you had to ram him into a wall, but no. Poor Neddy just got even simpler. The fight, that is, not Neddy. Moving swiftly on to the worst level of the game, where every single opal is placed in individual boxes and disseminated across the map, just so you can go around the entire desert collecting every possible item thoroughly, only to find you've missed something somewhere and have to retrace your steps several times over. The only comfort here is the fact that you can destroy some of the houses, but even that doesn't satiate your completionist tendencies, as some aren't even breakable. Even when you do finally find it, all you want to do is scream with rage because it was so obviously visible, and you could have used the cheat to find it, but you thought it was hidden in a box, which would have rendered it useless. Outback Safari. Thankfully, there is only one major fault with the level, so I don't have to spend any more time here than necessary, and that is the automatic camera movement when traversing the slope up into the mountain, just like Shipwrecks. It is a horrible pain, especially when you have to move optimally for the race with Shazza. Next we have quite possibly the largest map of the game, with one of the worst school teachers of all time. Not only does Sheila manage to lose her 8 children all at once, she does it twice. Nevertheless, here are a few fun things in Snow Worries. Firstly, when you find all of her kids, you may notice that their designs have changed slightly since the original. Instead of having 4 sets of twins, she now has 8 unique children. Could this be a hardware limitation of the PlayStation 2, or could it just be Chrome Studios not liking twins? Who's to say? Another dissimilarity between the two is the fact that the children now repeatedly shout "Here I am" or "I'm over here" in this particularly boyish tone that doesn't really match any of their voices, especially the girls. The original used multiple variations of a whistle call, which is kind of non-gendered, i.e. anybody with a tongue and lips can do it. So why they decided to change something like that is beyond me. Next up we have these physics-defying snowboarding wombats that will often get themselves stuck in certain places around the map, needing only your propinquity to release them from their glitch, and then your justice rangs to release them from their life. Here we have another example of how we can use the game's mechanics to our advantage, specifically the auto-targeting when biting. If Ty looks at something like a basket or a cage when it is above him, he will do his best to fly to it when pressing bite. On the topic of reaching for stuff, I became curious about something. As you know, you can get to higher platforms by jumping up and have Ty ledge grab with his rangs. And despite him having hands, he can't do this when he doesn't have them on his person, probably because he still needs to be able to catch them. But as we've seen from 2 up, Ty can ledge grab with 1 boomerang, which begs the question as to why he cannot do this after acquiring the second. This means that the catching animation completely inhibits this ability, which is just strange. This is an HD release bug only that seems to happen on snow levels. Near the beginning there will often be weird shadows appearing on the ground, not too dissimilar from Independence Day-esque alien motherships that often make you freak out from simply running across the terrain only to find there's nothing in the sky. This level is the first real instance of blue tongue lizards as common enemies, and it's worth noting that the projectile that they pick up can damage you even if it hasn't been thrown. So if you kill one after it has picked up its rock and then run into it as it's falling to the ground, you can still get hurt. I'm sure some of you may remember needing to tiptoe over this thin ice to get to the golden cog, but if you stand on the embankment at the highest point, you can run off and slide right under it. In the same area, I'd like to point out that you can just run right up the side of this central raised platform. Next up, we have a slightly difficult skip that can shave off several minutes to your runtime should you need to, but if you fail it, it can send you back a long way. As you saw, my first attempt killed me, and my second attempt sent me so far back down the mountain that I decided to try and find the final opal I was missing, yet again. Which, by the way, should you ever need to use it, there is a handy cheat that allows you to see objects outside of the render distance. I'll put some links in the description for how you can do those. I eventually managed to find the missing opal in the exact location I lost one during my last Let's Play of the game, inside this piece of wood. For some reason, opals have a tendency to go places where they really shouldn't, and occurs more often than you realise since they are usually attractive to you. Anyway, a few more attempts later and I finally managed to get myself on top of this post, which allowed me to jump up to the wood trough and onto the fencing, where you would need to hit the button below to raise the gate. Then you can jump on the gate itself and stepping stone your way to the elevating platform to access the thunder egg on the roof of the mill. That's a lot of finicky footwork, but this is a really useful trick for speedrunning. You just have to take some time to master the angle of the jumps. Now we're done with that level, let's move on to the second boss, Crikey. There are no real optimization strategies or glitches in this area, but there are a couple of interesting things to note. The first thing being this underwater tunnel that's quite easy to miss. Even though all it does is give you an extra life, I thought I'd point it out anyway. It's also worth noting that during the end of the cutscene for that poor shark, Julius is oddly floating above the water. Maybe his experiments have gone too far. Thanks again, Adam, for showing me that one too. Just in case anyone points me out on it, there is supposedly an unconfirmed glitch that will cause Ty to lose his shorts after returning to Crikey's Cove and swimming around for long enough. For purely science reasons, I tried this out for about half an hour, but got no results. Plus, the boss missions are not replayable on the PlayStation 2. For all I know, it's an Xbox or GameCube glitch, so I'm afraid I can't recreate it. At this point you will now have the Frosty Rang. If you don't, then your game is busted and you should probably replace it. For those of you who do have a pair of crystals shaped like elbow brackets, you will know that you can make platforms on water. Unless of course you skip the dialogue with Julius for some reason. And one of the first things you will likely do when you get them is collect this floating rainbow scale. But did you also know that after you have frozen a small iceberg, you can then make it sink by throwing a flamerang at it? Well, you do now. Not exactly a useful tool, but it's an interesting feature that I'm glad they added. Speaking of useless but cool additions, did you also know that you can use the Frosty Rangs to extinguish the tiki lights for a short period of time? However, much to my dismay, you cannot hasten the relighting with the flamerang. Additionally, you can also set the boomerang on fire when you throw it at or through the flame, which is also pretty neat. Now let's move on to the next level, Liar Liar Pants on Fire, which has the most enjoyable character of the franchise, Lenny the Lyrebird. That's not an overstatement either, I really love him. He's not exactly a major NPC, but he can be found in Burramudgee in Ty 2 and 3, where he will prattle on about some of his extreme adventures. Unfortunately, he's also the focal point of a very important skip useful for speedrunning. When performed correctly, you will jump on his head at the precise angle to make the game start pushing you off into the wall. While holding down the Ty's view button, you might be able to activate it should you stay still for long enough. Looking over to the warp trees, closing first person and jumping while wrestling the camera might just get you over the invisible wall and between the two teleport triggers. At this point you must press and hold the jump button to glide, otherwise you will fall to your doom. Then slowly bring yourself around this building, which incidentally is the boss arena, so if you feel as though you don't have enough height for this trick, land in here, come out and go back in again and beat Sly first. However, if you do have enough air, swing yourself around a bunch more invisible walls and land on top of the boiler room. Congratulations, you've now got to the end of the level. If you hit the sides or land on the door, you have nothing but death in your future. The same applies for the boss room. It's also worth pointing out that when you are out of bounds on the PlayStation 2, you will get this horrendous graphical vomit on your screen that makes this trick even harder. This is essentially what is defined as a run killer, because if you don't get that jump off Lenny within the first few tries, you have no real chance of beating the world record. And it's no fun to do casually, so I wouldn't even recommend trying. Not only that, but nearly every time you'll hear Lenny say, come on, jump in here, if you exit his little bubble. So even if you're not careful, you'll hear, come on, jump in here, every jump in here, single jump in here, time you try. Something else to point out before I move on, and that is if you accidentally hit the left warp to send you further into the level, Lenny no longer respawns on the other side, so you have to exit the level and come back in. A little further in we have something that I wouldn't really call a glitch or a feature. Things in ice just have this tendency to act as though that fact were just blatantly untrue. Unfortunately, this was another level where I managed to misplace a singular opal, though I think 3 in one playthrough isn't too bad. One thing to note, should this ever happen to you, is if you exit the level and re-enter, and the opal you lost was originally in a box, it will respawn within a new one, making it easier to find. That combined with the item cheat I mentioned before makes hunting down that last opal really easy. Just before we get to the slide, I encountered a glitch that's new to me. So as long as you're not touching the ground, Lenny will persistently jam his face into the wall with no sign of slowing or stopping. I have never seen this happen before on the PlayStation 2, and I couldn't recreate it on this glitch run, so for all I know this can only happen on the Steam release. I'm sure you remember this room from earlier, but when you actually fight Sly for the first time, there are only 2 rangs you'll need, the Frosty rang and the Flamerang. Hitting him with the former will immediately take off 1/3 of his health, then when he stands back up you can hit him again to freeze him. I missed, but it is doable. Then when he's frozen, switch over to the Flamerang and take off a chunk of his health. Repeating these 2 actions will allow you to complete the boss without either of you actually moving.
I can't believe it.
Neither can I, Sly. I really can't. Over and beyond the Black Stump, we have to once again save Sheila's lost children, one of whom has managed to climb its way up onto this high platform. Normally you can't get up here from the ground, but if you sandwich yourself between these 2 frill lizards, you can gain a little extra height to get to the koala. As you can imagine, throwing the Frosty Rang at fire or superheated rock and gravel doesn't really do much. However, if you throw one at a tree, you can still form grand ice sculptures, despite it being ablaze. At the end of the level, where you help Ken fend off a bunch of frills with a snowball launcher, you can jump on this wall and maintain the falling pose as you slide left and right. Moving too far in either direction and it'll stop working, but it's fun to do, and proves just how much free time you really have. Finally for this level, we're returning to the physics-defying wombats, specifically the one you race in the time trial. Just look at him, maintaining a constant speed on flat ground with various coverings. Moving over to the last level with major collectibles, Rex marks the spot. First off, I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but it is a true fact of nature. Seahorses can actually fly. It's a very rare occurrence, but when they do, and you catch them, it's a real sight to behold. At the end of the treasure trail, when you get to the final chest, if you're quick skipping the cutscenes, you'll sometimes appear inside it. I've not managed to get this happen consistently, but it's a little silly when it does happen. Now I'm sure you remember this negligent parent from Shipwrecks. Well, this time she has a problem with noisy lizards. My first interpretation when playing this game was always to wait until one of them had stopped and picked up an explosive barrel so that I could throw a rang and blow them up. Now, although this method does work, there is a quicker way that doesn't involve waiting for them to stop. If you throw your Frosty Rang in the water in their path, they will hit the berg and begin sinking. This is a lot faster and doesn't depend so heavily on RNG. We have another speedrunning technique in this level that's a bit tricky, but it's a lot faster than going into the volcano and weaving your way around all the platforms inside. Jumping from this spot and getting as much height as possible from the glide will eventually let you grab onto this ledge to collect the Thunder Egg. Closing up on the final 2 levels, there are only a couple of things left to show. Firstly, in Cass's Pass, there is a large skip that can be done early on in the level. When done correctly, you will land on this outstanding tree and then jump through the wall on the left to glide over near to the end of the level. This will likely take a few attempts, but it saves a lot of time. Be sure to also collect all of the Thunder Eggs before trying this, as there are some spikes beneath the tree that will likely take off a few chunks of health before you make a successful landing. Additionally, be sure to glide to a safe distance before dropping, because the game may just straight up Mufasa you off the cliff. There's not really much to be said for Cass's Crest, other than the fact that you can hit the button for the steam vents way before Shadow even gets to you, and then you can just carry on doing other stuff until she takes damage. Once you have completed the game, collecting everything to 100%, you can then head over to the waterfall in Rainbow Cliffs to access a bonus level. I'm led to believe that the level changes depending on what version you're running, so if I ever get an Xbox or a GameCube, I'll buy Ty and let you know. The Steam version is pretty much identical to the PlayStation 2, so if you're used to that, then that's what you'll see here. It doesn't serve much of a purpose other than to gather the remaining concept art. Just be sure to never use the infrarang here, as the noise it makes is just awful. Not as bad as on the PlayStation 2, but still pretty bad. If you think there are any I've missed or need additional clarification on, please let me know down in the comments and I might make another video on it. Feel free to leave a comment anyway though, as I do love reading them, and thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Why don't you have another go, you muck?